You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and there's a lot to get to today. A couple big New York sports stories. Zion Williamson made his debut and put on a show in the fourth quarter. I may also break down Rutgers, Iowa, but I gotta start with Luis Rojas being hired as Mets manager. The first thing I want to talk about with this is the reaction among Mets fans. And it's kind of surprising to me. They're choosing to look on the bright side. They're trying to be optimistic. And, you know, I understand it. It's better to be optimistic than pessimistic. You'll live longer. But I just don't see what there is to be optimistic about here. This is a guy who wasn't even among their finalists for the job the first time around. The finalists were Beltran, Eduardo Perez, and Derek Shelton. Depending on who you believe, Tim Bogart was there also. But Rojas wasn't. Rojas was eliminated from consideration after the second round of interviews. And if you'll recall, the Mets then went to a third round, and they chose Beltran. Well, what changed in 2 months to make this guy a viable candidate? What changed to make the quality control coach, God only knows what that guy does. That's like the pitching strategist from last year. Who the hell knows what the pitching strategist does? And who the hell knows what the quality control coach does? I mean, you've got to be kidding me. What changed to make this guy a legitimate MLB manager? The Mets clearly have a high opinion of him. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. You're allowed to think highly of him. You know, he does come from a good baseball family, so it's clear that he knows the game. He has been a minor league manager before and a coach for the Mets. He does know the game, but if you dig a little deeper, you can tell that this guy just isn't what the Mets needed. His last year in Binghamton was 2018, and he led them to a 64-76 record. Now, if you look at his overall managing record in the minors, it's not bad. 555 and 475. That's actually pretty good. It equates to a 539 winning percentage. But this guy has very, very limited major league experience. And for a team like the Mets that is going through what they are going through, they need a steady hand. They needed a veteran. They needed a Dusty Baker. They needed a John Gibbons. Even Hensley Mullins would have made more sense than this guy. All the Met fan websites were saying that the Mets should hire a manager now. Don't wait. Don't go into spring training without a manager. Spring training is still 3 weeks away. They weren't going to go into spring training without a manager? That's ridiculous. Websites like Mets Daddy and Metsmerized saying the Mets should act quickly and hire Rojas now. Those guys wouldn't know Rojas if they fell on him. It's a joke. The Mets only had 2 options here, and this goes for the Astros and Red Sox as well. Either hire an experienced manager like Baker, Showalter, Gibbons, whoever, or hire an interim and then conduct a full search next year. Because you can't conduct a full managerial search now. There's too much scrutiny. There are a bunch of candidates that are going to turn you down. There's no way. Now, the one good thing the Mets did here is they signed Rojas to a 2-year deal with a bunch of club options. That's good. That's the right way to go about this. Don't lock a guy up long-term for 4 or 5 years. If you want to hire a guy for 2 years with some club options, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the Mets thinking that this is their guy and putting together a system where he can be around for a long time. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And to the people saying that, oh, it's clear he wasn't their first choice, they didn't want this guy, this is a panic move. No. Alright, was he their first choice? Absolutely not. But this is the hand that the Mets were dealt. They had to go to their second guy. I mean, they could have avoided all this by hiring Joe Girardi. Joe Girardi would have been the perfect guy for the Mets, but whatever. He's in Philly now. That die has been cast. The issue that you should have is this guy has very limited qualifications to be a manager. The people comparing this to Aaron Boone, newsflash, Boone was a big risk. And look, is Boone a really good manager? Yes. But there are still some Yankees fans that are skeptical of him. And you can include me in that group. In Joe Girardi's second year, the Yankees won the World Series. What did Aaron Boone do his second year? Lost in the ALCS. What did Joe Torre do his first year? Won the World Series. This follow the leader strategy that has been permeating all throughout sports. No! Be different! NFL teams are doing it by trying to hire the next Sean McVay. Eventually, the well's gonna dry up. Oh, and this is my favorite. People saying Felipe Alou was a good manager. Felipe Alou was one of the worst managers of his era. Felipe Alou had great teams, and they did nothing under him. This guy never won a playoff series. He only made it there once. I mean, that is ridiculous. The reverse historians, I swear to God, I heard Mets fans hyping up Felipe Alou. Go to Mets opening day, take a poll of all the Mets fans there, and have them tell you what 2 teams Felipe Alou managed in Major League Baseball. They wouldn't be able to tell you. This guy took a San Francisco Giants team that was 1 win away from a World Series and had them eliminated in 4 games in the NLDS to an inferior Marlins team. You want to tell me there's no shame in losing to the eventual World Series winning champions? Fine, I'm going to hold you to that. Does it soften the blow a little bit? Yeah, I guess it does a little bit, but I'd rather just beat the eventual World Series winning team. Whatever team loses next Sunday, Chiefs or 49ers, you think that's going to soften the blow? They lost to the Super Bowl winning team? If the Chiefs win, you think that's going to soften the blow for the Titans or the Texans? If the Niners win, you think that's going to soften the blow for the Packers or Vikings? No! That's ridiculous. That's utterly, utterly ridiculous. The reverse historians here with the Mets are real. Look, I understand you're trying to be optimistic. There's not a lot to be happy about here. And you're trying to hold on to whatever shred of sanity you have left. But be realistic here, folks. Do you really think Luis Rojas is going to be here for the next 10 years? Because I got news for you, he's not. I don't think Van Wagenen's going to be here in 10 years. Why would I think that his third manager in his second year here is going to be here? It doesn't look good here, Mets fans. Open your eyes and see it. Be realistic. You guys are going to finish with a worse record this year than you did last year. Hopefully Van Wagenen will be fired, because I think he's a snake oil salesman. He tried to put you guys in a win-now mode, and it hasn't worked. There's nothing to be excited about here, Mets fans. I just wish you could see it. Moving over now to the other big New York sports news, and that is Eli Manning calling it quits. He will hold a news conference tomorrow where he will announce his retirement. I never believed for a minute that he would play for another team. Even when he was benched for Jones and there were rumors that he could be traded, I never believed it. If the Giants didn't cut him last year, then there was no way he was going to play for another team. I think the Giants mean too much to him. I think he sees the value in just playing for one team. I think Tom Brady does too, to tell you the truth. I think he's coming back to the Patriots. And it does help your legacy a little bit if you can just stay with one team. It's not something that happens a lot. And if you're one of those guys who can say that they played for just one team their whole career, that's impressive. Eli Manning has been a very divisive figure in the past few years. Of course, when he was benched by McAdoo and then reinserted, and then he starts in Kyle Lauletta's rookie year, and there's some people calling for Lauletta, and then Lauletta gets in trouble with the police, so Eli has to start, and then the whole Daniel Jones thing. It's been a tumultuous few years, and certainly the Giants should have handled it better. It's a black mark on Eli's career, and it's a black mark on the Giants. But they did let him go out with his head held high. He did win his last start. It was the quintessential Eli game, that game against the Dolphins. 20 for 28, 283 yards, and 2 touchdowns to go along with 3 interceptions. I mean, that's Eli. That's the quintessential Eli game. And of course, he will retire with a career 500 record. Eli Manning is one of those quarterbacks that in the regular season, when the games really didn't matter as much, didn't look as good as he did when the lights were on bright. He was an excellent playoff quarterback. 2 Super Bowl MVPs. It doesn't get much better than that. It doesn't get much better than slaying Goliath twice in the Patriots. I'm glad that all Giants fans, after Eli was benched, came together and realized the career that he had. It's amazing how it works in New York. 1 minute you're the GOAT, the next minute you're revered. That's why you gotta love this city, man, I'm telling you. And Eli thrived under it. Eli was the perfect quarterback for New York. He was an altar boy. He never got into trouble. He's what we should want our kids to be. And it made my heart happy to see that the hashtag #ThankYouEli was trending on Twitter after he was benched for Jones. Because the Giants, in Eli's last few years, treated him like garbage. Of course, snapping the consecutive game streak and then resuming it the week after. And then the year after that, you don't improve the roster enough. Eli looks terrible. The whole team looks terrible. and there are legitimate calls for him to be benched. And then Dave Gettleman takes Daniel Jones 6 overall, with Eli still on the roster. And Eli being the starter, the supposed Kansas City model. Meanwhile, Daniel Jones starts the 3rd week of the season. That's not the Kansas City model. That's not the Green Bay model. That's the nothing model. And it looks like it's worked out. Daniel Jones had a good rookie year. He didn't have a great rookie year. He only won 3 starts. And he turned the ball over a lot. But there's a lot there to like. There's no question that Eli helped him. But Eli's last few years should have been handled much better by the Giants. At least they let him go out with his head held high. He started 2 more games after the insertion of Daniel Jones because Jones got hurt. And he won 1 and he lost 1. Typical Eli. It's amazing how the last 2 games of his career were just a perfect microcosm of his career. Couldn't have been done any better. Now, the big question that's going around is Eli a Hall of Famer? And I think the answer is yes. I think when you look at his playoff success, the 2 Super Bowl MVPs are really the only argument I need. I don't see how you can leave him out of the Hall of Fame. Playoff success is more important than regular season success. It's why I think Eli's a Hall of Famer and Phillip Rivers isn't. Now, that's not to say that guys like Dan Marino and Jim Kelly aren't Hall of Famers. They are. But they at least made a Super Bowl. Phillip Rivers hasn't. Eli Manning, 2 Super Bowl MVPs. And the 2 of them are joined at the hip because they were traded for each other. It's an interesting hypothetical. Would the Giants have won those 2 Super Bowls with Phillip Rivers as quarterback? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I understand the argument against him. He had a bunch of moments where he looked really bad. Eli Manning, at his peak, was just barely a top 10 quarterback. He was never top 5. He was never elite. Was he elite in the playoffs? Yes. But you gotta get there first. And there was never a season where Eli carried the Giants. It was the defense. In fact, in 2007, he led the NFL in interceptions. The year that he won his first Super Bowl, he led the league in interceptions and only completed 56% of his passes. And there were legitimate arguments as to whether this guy would ever be great. And give the Giants credit, they stuck with him through thick and thin. They stuck with him through his best days, and they stuck with him through his worst days. Eli Manning does not pass the eye test to be a Hall of Famer. You have to base it solely on the playoffs. Does he pass the eye test in that respect? Yes. But the eye test is more for the regular season. And regular season Eli is not a Hall of Famer. Playoff Eli is a Hall of Famer. When you combine the 2, you get a Hall of Famer in my book. The Iron Man streak means something. He's 7th all-time in touchdowns. He's 7th all-time in passing yards. He's had a great career. And I think he is very, very deserving of being a Hall of Famer. I will repeat something that I put on Twitter. From a Jets fan, thank you, Eli. Moving over now to Zion Williamson. And this was a very, very interesting debut. For the first 3 quarters, he did not look good. In fact, he looked like garbage. He only had 5 points through 3 quarters. He looked out of shape. and it almost looked like the Pelicans rushed him back from injury. But then something interesting happened. He came back and scored 17 consecutive points in the fourth quarter, including 4 for 4 from beyond the arc, which is something that no one, and I mean no one, expected. This is a debut that should give all Pelicans fans hope for the future. The one thing you have to be wary about is, can the Pelicans keep him around? Because bear in mind, you've had franchise players before in Chris Paul and Anthony Davis, and you haven't been able to keep him around. Now it looks like Zion will be different. You have a really, really smart GM in David Griffin, and you have a really good core to go alongside him with Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram, who are both getting better alongside Zion. There's nothing stopping him from being a Pelican for a very, very long time. One thing that I didn't like was Alvin Gentry pulling him when he was hot. I don't care what mathematics say, the hot hand does mean something. When you're feeling it, and you see it on the court every night. Look, it would have been one thing if Gentry had said going into this game, he has a minutes restriction, he's coming back from surgery, we want to be careful with him. That's fine. But he said that he has no minutes restriction. It's clear he did. Alright, just own it. And for goodness sake, it cost you the game. You lost by 4 to a team that you're chasing for the playoffs. If you want this kid to try to help you for a playoff run, then you need to let him help you. Pull him in the first half. Pull him when he's not playing well. That way you have him for the second half and he can get going. I guarantee you if Zion would have stayed in, the Pelicans would have won that game. There was no reason to lie there. I'm okay with lying to the media, but not in a situation like that. There's no reason to. And one other thing that ticked me off about this game was all the people pointing to this as a reason why Zion will fail or succeed. It's one game! You can't read too much into that. It's his first game against legitimate NBA talent. He's not going to score 17 consecutive points every night. And he's certainly not only going to score 5 points in 3 quarters every night. The truth is somewhere in between. You have to take this game for what it was, his first game. It was an impressive game. And if you think that Zion is going to be fantastic, you can point to this as evidence of that. But that's all it is. It's just evidence. It's not a slam dunk conviction. And to the people who were skeptical of him, you can't point to the 5 points in 3 quarters as anything but an aberration. He has to do it again and again and again. Let's see how he finishes out the year and even plays next year before we can see what this guy really is. He does need to be great immediately. That's the thing. He had an absurd amount of hype around him at Duke, and he has an absurd amount of hype around him now. He really doesn't get the benefit of a grace period. His grace period was when he was hurt. He does need to come back and dominate immediately. And I think he can. Again, is he going to score 17 points consecutively every night? No. But it's not a stretch to expect him to average 18, 19 points this year. Don't make this game out to be anything more than what it was. Just further evidence that he's going to be a great player. Not a slam dunk. Certainly not evidence that he's going to bust. It's just one game, folks. That's all it is. I'll do a little Rutgers, Iowa now. And first up, let me just say how impressive this year has been for Rutgers. Steve Pickel, I'm actually not sure how you pronounce it, is in his 4th year at Rutgers, and he has not done a good job there so far. He has never had more than 15 wins. But when he was at Stony Brook, he needed 3 years to implement a system. His 4th year, he improved a little bit, and then 5th year, they were regular season champions. I give the athletic director at Rutgers credit for letting him run with it a little bit and giving him time to implement his system. And he has done a fantastic job. Rutgers is ranked this year for the first time in, I think, 41 years. It's been an insane year so far for Rutgers. And it's been on the backs of 2 really, really good players in Ron Harper Jr. and Geo Baker. It's funny, the 2 of them really shouldn't work together because neither one of them can shoot threes, but yet somehow it's been working. The 2 of them are excellent slashers. Harper is a dominant rebounder for a guard, and Baker is a great complementary piece. He takes too many shots, though. I'd like him to take a step back with the shots. He tends to get a little greedy, but that's something that can be worked on. And you saw yesterday why it needs to be worked on, as Baker went 1 for 6 from the field, including 0 for 4 from beyond the arc. If Baker had passed a little bit more, Rutgers would have won that game. The only reason why Rutgers was in it for so long was because Harper looked like the second coming of Jason Kidd. He dropped 29 and 9. He was unreal. And so was Akwasi Yeboah and Miles Johnson. Yeboah dropped 17, Johnson 10, 4, and 4 with 3 steals. He had a very, very impressive game. Rutgers had a chance to win this game. It was just that Baker had a bad night. And hopefully this will serve as evidence to him that he needs to alter his game a little bit. And that's what college is for. These guys aren't finished products. He certainly has the coach to work with him on it, and there's no reason why he can't get it together in a couple months. But when you look at Iowa, going into this game, I thought they were the better team, and that's because of one guy and one guy only. Luka Garza. With all due respect to Joe Weiskamp and CJ Frederick, Luka Garza can do things on a basketball court that very few players his age can. He's averaging 23 and 10. And here's the kicker, he's 6'11", and he's shooting 38.5% from beyond the arc. I was trying to think of a player who's that good at rebounding at his height that can also shoot threes. The only guy that popped into my head was Nikola Jokic. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Garza can be Jokic 2.0 minus the passing. He's such a special player to watch. It's very, very possible that this kid could be a lottery pick this year. He's so much fun to watch. This is a really fun Iowa team to watch. Fran McCaffrey has been doing this for a really, really long time, and this is shaping up to be his best coaching job yet. Weiskamp and Frederick are 2 really, really good secondary scoring options. Weiskamp could even be the best player on a team that makes it to the big dance. He's shooting 45.5% from the field, 39.5% from beyond the arc, and he's averaging 15, 6, and 2. He's a really, really good player. And Iowa got production up and down their lineup. Toussaint dropped 14. Even a guy like Ryan Kreiner dropped 11 coming off the bench. This is a very scary Iowa team. They're so well-rounded. And the Big Ten does not have a super team this year. Teams like Maryland, Michigan State, and Illinois are good, but they're not great. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, for an extended period of time, I'm gonna make a prediction. Iowa will not win their regular season conference championship, but they will win the tournament that provides an automatic entrant to March Madness. And they'll be an Elite Eight team. I'll end the show there. I don't know what the future holds for tomorrow. I'm going to leave you in suspense. Until then, I am Jacob Valk saying that last year the team had so many players coming in and out that they didn't even bother to sew their names on the back of the uniform. They put their names on with Velcro.